Ram Madhavji is an eminent political leader, author, and president of India Foundation, a New Delhi-based think tank. With his extensive knowledge and expertise, he's here today to speak on the compelling topic of India's role in the Indo-Pacific, charting a strategic path to 2047. As the president of India Foundation, Ram Madhavji has played a vital role in curating significant global and national initiatives, including the Indian Ocean Conference and the ASEAN India Youth Summit. These events, known for fostering dialogue and cooperation, have paved the way for India to actively engage with nations in the Indo-Pacific region, shaping its strategic approach and forging strong partnerships. Having previously served as the National General Secretary of the Bharatiya Janata Party, Ram Madhavji possesses a wealth of experience in handling the political affairs of Jammu Kashmir, Assam, and the northeastern states of India. His expertise in navigating complex geopolitical landscapes has shaped his understanding of India's evolving role in the region. Furthermore, Ram Madhavji is a renowned author and thinker known for his insightful works such as The Hindutva Paradigm and Because India Comes First. His most recent book, Partition to Freedom, delves into the untold history of India's partition in 1947 and the birth of Pakistan. With his extensive contributions to the field of political analysis and his regular contributions to leading Indian newspapers like the Indian Express and the Hindustan Times, he brings a unique perspective to the discussion of India's strategic path in the Indo-Pacific. Over to you, Ram Madhav.
This is enough or? Okay. Thank you, Amish, for that very extensive introduction. When we are introduced, we get to know a lot more about ourselves. Thank you, friends. This is an excellent opportunity for me to interact with such young and very brilliant minds. Most of you are Indian minds.
By definition, brilliant.
Brilliant. Friends, a week from now, or less than a week from now, Prime Minister of India, Mr. Narendra Modi, will be in USA. And there is a palpable enthusiasm on both sides about this impending visit of our Prime Minister. And he's going to get a very rare opportunity of addressing the joint session of the US Congress for the second time. I said rare because in the history of so many decades, or rather a couple of centuries, only one person has had this honor of addressing the US Congress twice. That was Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel. And if you don't include Mr. Zelensky, who did the 2 virtual addresses to the Joint Congress. So Prime Minister Modi will be addressing the joint session. And of course, there's going to be a major reception being hosted on the White House lawns by President Biden. And we are told that that will be one of the largest ever dinners that the White House has hosted in history. The one earlier occasion where it hosted a slightly bigger one was when Pope Francis visited White House in 2015. So thousands are being invited by President Biden and his team for the dinner also. It shows that there is a renewed interest in India and its role or its place in the world, even in countries like America and elsewhere in the world. Why is that significance? Why is it that so much significance is attached to India and its role today? I see a couple of very important reasons. Of course, one is India has today grown into a big economy. It's a $3 trillion economy. We are considered number 5 or number 6. I mean, depending on where the host country of yours stands. So we are aspiring to become the 3rd largest economy in a few years' time from now. So the economy matters, money matters. So we are an important economic power in the world. But I would like to hasten to add that besides growing economic muscle, economic strength of India, it's also the strategic importance or growing strategic importance of a country of India's size in the most happening region in the world today, namely the Indo-Pacific region. In the last century, global power axis by which I mean, if you want a definition for that phrase, global power axis, it can be defined loosely as a region where economic, military, strategic power is concentrated. It's called the global power axis. In the last century, that power axis is located or situated somewhere between Western Europe and USA. Obviously, they were the countries with strong economies, big economies, economic powerhouses. They were the ones who were holding, military power also. So it was between Pacific and Atlantic. It was there that the global power axis was situated in the last century. But came this century, 2021, the power axis has shifted and shifted decisively in 2020s to our neighborhood, which is the Indo-Pacific neighborhood. It is here that the economies of scale exist. It is here that big populations with purchasing power exist. PPP terms, if you see, largest PPP economies are in our neighborhood. And of course, big militaries. India itself boasts of a massive military infrastructure, so is China. So this is the region which has now emerged as the most happening and most talked about region. It is jocularly said that any given point in time, if you run your satellite imagery, you will find half of the world's warships and submarines roaming around in this region, in these two oceans. It has acquired that kind of importance. Now, in that region, India has risen as an important pole. India has traditionally been a peace-loving nation. If you see the history of India's last 75 years, I'm talking about independent history. India has a long history, but I'm just talking about the last 7 decades of its independent existence. India has never participated in any militaristic alliances. It has always been very reticent to any conflicts, getting into any conflicts. Another matter that we always participated actively in UN-assigned peace missions in Africa, largely in 8 countries, India has its presence even to this day. But otherwise, it has always stayed away from conflicts, whether it was in West Asia or it was in Middle East or anywhere in the world. So then what is it that India can significantly contribute when Indo-Pacific emerges as the new flashpoint of global strategic ecosystem? We all know that if we talk about Indo-Pacific today, the only thing that comes to mind is the conflict in South China Sea, or the Taiwan question, or the growing dominance of China in the region or in the entire world, and how the West sees or wants to combat it. Here, I would like to make India's vision. I would like to place India's vision before you. And of course, once I make a brief presentation, I will be at your mercy for some time. When we talk about Indo-Pacific, we in India look at it as not one geographical or maritime entity. It is 2 big oceans. There is a confluence of these 2 oceans that is called Indo-Pacific. So when we talk about Indo-Pacific, it's not just about the challenges of one ocean or the other. It's actually a confluence of 2 oceans. Pacific as an ocean with many countries, many big countries, including the USA, Japan, China, Taiwan. But the other is the Indian Ocean. Remember, Indian Ocean is the world's 3rd largest water body. It is home to 38 countries. And not small countries. Countries like Indonesia, which boast a population of over 250 million. Pakistan with about 18, 19 million. Bangladesh with about 16, 17 million. 160, 170 million. So these are all big countries. And India itself is 1.4 billion. We are the world's #1 country today already in population, though. So this is one region which has massive populations, large number of countries, and slowly but definitely growing economies. India sees an important role for itself in this Indian Ocean region. Naturally, just as South China Sea doesn't belong to China, Indian Ocean doesn't belong to India. But then Indian Ocean, India is the largest power in the Indian Ocean region. It is in that sense a major regional power. What we have set before us as our immediate and important strategic objective in this region is that India should now grow as an important leading power for the nations in the Indian Ocean region, for the states in the Indian Ocean region. I mentioned to you, Indian Ocean is home to 38 small and big countries. Most of them are island nations. A large number of them are island nations. Their challenges are different. Their needs are different. For example, the climate issues affect most of these countries. Indonesia is building a new capital away from Jakarta for the fear of inundation 20 years, 50 years from now. Same is the fear for countries like Maldives. As the sea levels rise, countries face challenges. So here the challenges are of a different nature. Climatic issues, connectivity issues, supply chain issues, marine ecology, marine biology issues. We have different challenges. India has the ambition to grow as a net peace provider in this region. You know, we hear about the phrase net security provider. India should rise as a net peace provider in the region. And with its growing economic strength, with its assertive leadership, India can definitely play that role in the next 2 to 2.5 decades. In 1947, India gained its independence. By 2047, India will be completing 100 years of its independent existence. Countries can have different objectives for their centenaries. You know, there is that famous book by Michael Pillsbury, The 100-Year Marathon, talking about what is China's objective in 100 years. China has set itself before itself a goal that by the time it becomes 100, it should be dominating the whole world. India's language or India's vision will be different. India will be looking at a situation where it will become the major, major peace, major harbinger of peace for the region immediately in our neighborhood, and then beyond also in the entire Indo-Pacific region. So firstly, initially, we focused more on the immediate neighbors. We developed institutional arrangements with our immediate neighbors. We first created SARC, South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. There was a less cooperation and more conflict in SARC. So it did not work because we are okay with the eastern side, but we are not okay with our western side. So we decided that keep the western side pending pending and work more on the eastern side. Then we created BIMSTEC. It's about a Bay of Bengal initiative for multi-sectoral cooperation. BIMSTEC involves countries in Indian Ocean region again, but largely to the east of India. But then India realizes that its role cannot be limited to one small group of nations. So came the 1990s, India started talking about look east policy. We need to go beyond immediate neighborhood. Look east involves looking at many more countries in the region, including ASEAN group of countries. Now today, look east has been upgraded into act east. Because, you know, in India, bureaucracy takes words literally. So when they said look east, they were looking at east for a decade, not doing enough. Then the next Prime Minister, Mr. Vajpayee, had to tell them that look east doesn't mean just looking at east. You need to do, you need to act. So that's how act east became the new mantra for India. So today we are looking at engaging with all the countries in the region. In fact, India's relations with the ASEAN group of countries have now grown very strong. ASEAN-India trade is growing. We have, with all the 10 countries in ASEAN, we have strong bilateral ties. We have a free trade agreement with ASEAN. So India today has expanded its relations, its bonding with many countries in the region. And now we are going beyond that. You probably have heard about Prime Minister Narendra Modi hosting the second South Pacific Island Nations Conference very recently at Papua New Guinea. Again, at a group of 12, 13 small island nations. Small countries, small challenges do not appear in the big game that big countries play, China and America play. They are small dots, but they have their challenges, they have their concerns. India is ready to step in to address, to help these countries stand on their own feet. You have seen the Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea openly making this statement that we needed a third shoulder to lean on. And he said, and we find in India the third country to which we can turn to. We don't want to choose between this power or that power. This historic dilemma for many countries right from the days of Cold War. So we used to talk about those days about a non-aligned leadership. We tried to provide a non-aligned leadership at that time, but unfortunately, India was not that strong. We were very romantic. We also thought that we had a role in the world to play, but we did not have that strength, enough strength to really play that role. Although non-alignment was a noble idea, we could not do much when 62 war came. Non-alignment collapsed like a pack of cards. But this time, we are talking about Global South. And we are talking about Global South. It is on two principles. Number one, it's not any power block. Global South is the group of countries which are developing in nature. Same old idea of developing nations concept. Developing countries in nature, mostly in the southern hemisphere of the world, that includes countries in Africa, countries in Asia, countries in South Pacific, also in Latin America. So India aspires to represent the interests of those countries. Number two, no to war. We do not want to be a party in any conflict. So when India leads this Global South in the next 1-2 decades, it will be towards helping establish peace, not becoming a party to any future conflict or any ongoing conflict, whether it is Ukraine or maybe, God forbid, if something happens in South China Sea there. India's role, together with the countries in Global South, would be and should be as net peace provider. Friends, with that vision, India is moving ahead in its immediate neighborhood and beyond in Global South. So I will stop here by emphasizing that today, India has an ambition. Not all countries talk about their ambition. I mean, the word ambition has various connotations. But India has an ambition to grow as an influential but responsible global power. Towards that end, it sees its immediate playground, immediate ground for action to be the Indian Ocean region and going slightly beyond the Indo-Pacific region. I will stop here and maybe Amish and you will have some discussion. Thank you.
Madhav ji, I'll ask you a few questions and then we can throw the floor open to the House. I remember reading this article, I think it was in Foreign Policy magazine a few years back, that it may appear like Indo-Pacific is suddenly becoming important, but the point of that article was actually it's a return to normal. This was how, for most of human history, this was the region that was most important. It changed for a few centuries, and now it's coming back to this region, again becoming important geopolitically, economically, militarily, as it used to be for most of human history. There are many who say that India is not just a nation, it's also a civilization and a civilization state. How does our sense of history impact how we see the Indo-Pacific? Because our northern neighbor has a historical narrative of the century of humiliation, which impacts how it sees the Indo-Pacific.
Okay, I mean, talking of century of humiliation, if we were to talk about India, India should start talking about centuries of humiliation. So that's not the issue exactly. The point is, you are right. Indo-Pacific, or especially the Indian Ocean region, is home to many old civilizations. In fact, one thing that binds the countries in the region, right from Indonesia to Iran, you look at the spread of the nations, or you take from the eastern coast of Africa to India and beyond, we are all connected not just through United Nations or current international politics. We are connected through history. We are connected through civilizational links. India's civilizational links with the Arab world date back by at least 2 millennia. First Arab sailors came to India in, prehistoric period, pre-Christian period itself. So this region has been home to old ancient civilizations. In fact, that makes this regional oneness, regional unity, a much more easier thing than probably to create a unity within European Union, which we are seeing what is happening with it, what happened here in Brexit and all, or creating a unity artificially in the form of USSR or something else. So naturally, united region in terms of its civilizational and historical background, that is another very important factor in India becoming a pivot in this region, because India is the most trusted nation in this region in terms of its civilizational history, unlike other civilizations that exist in our neighborhood.
From the civilization and from history, if you come to geography, if you look at the map, you very rightly said Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean are two different oceans, but there are some straits which connect them. And those are among the most important choke points on world trade, the Malacca Straits. We have the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, which are very close to it. It's strategic. What role do you think the Andaman and Nicobar Islands will play in future geopolitical competition? And is India alive to it?
Oh, of course. Andaman Nicobar is an important part of India. And when we talk about India's southernmost border, we do not talk about Tamil Nadu or Kanyakumari. We talk about the Indira Point in Car Nicobar, in Nicobar Islands, which is very close to Indonesia, northern Indonesian territories. So it's a very important region for India. India understands its significance in terms of its geographical location. It's located very close to the so-called choke points, the Malacca Straits. But you see, today in the growing strategic environment, not just Andaman Nicobar, even Maldives has become a very important location for when we talk about freedom of navigation, open sea lanes and all that. There are many points where you can be choked. So that is the reason why India wants to play a proactive role in ensuring that Indian Ocean remains free and open. Before you talk about Indo-Pacific becoming free and open, Indian Ocean should also remain free and open. But when we talk about free and open Indian Ocean, India adds one more word, which is very important. When we talk about it, we also say free, open, and inclusive Indian Ocean region. When we talk about free and open Indian Ocean, we are not excluding any country. This free and open dialogue is FOIP, is not against any other third country. Every country should enjoy that freedom. That is what is true peace called. So yes, there are choke points. India understands its strategic locations, importance of its strategic locations, just as Andaman Nicobar is very important. So is Maldives. So we have a base in Maldives also, one of the islands in Maldives also. So we are developing a port in Mauritius now. These are all important points on the high seas for the supply chains and all, because supply chain security is going to be a major issue for the world, especially we have seen after pandemic and after Ukraine war. We realized suddenly the supply chains are so vital for the survival of nations. So there, Indian Ocean is very important in terms of its supply chain security, supply chain safety. India understands the importance.
How does the economic, and you said rightly, the supply chains, the changes that are happening within the supply chains over the last few years because of the pandemic, the de-risking that's happening across the supply chains. Some countries such as Vietnam has benefited strongly from it. India is also beginning to benefit from it. What can India do to make sure that more of parts of the supply chains travel through India? And how will that impact the Indo-Pacific geopolitical space going forward?
Supply chain security, supply chain, creating unbroken supply chain systems involves many countries. No one country can completely take up the responsibility of supply chain security. But having said it, yes, India is keen that it should grow as a major hub of manufacturing so that it can attend to the needs of the countries in its neighborhood, in the entire region. So towards that end, we have initiated programs like Make in India. When Prime Minister goes to US this time, there's going to be a major agreement being signed, expected to be signed. I should not preempt it, I do not know, but it is expected to be signed. It's about manufacturing of General Electric's jet engines, which we started using now in our Indian domestically manufactured aircraft like Tejas, etc. But it is in use in the aviation industry, helicopter industry in many countries in our neighborhood. But they are always manufactured in the US only. So we insisted, and we are likely to get that agreement signed to move the manufacturing of these GE jet engines, manufacturing facilities to move to India. The idea is that now India being located very strategically in the Indian Ocean region, in the middle of the Indian Ocean region, it is the pivot there. If that becomes the hub of manufacturing industry, then it becomes easier for managing the supply lines in the Indo-Pacific region. So India is focusing on Make in India. We are actually trying to get more and more investment into India towards this Make in India, making this Make in India successful. And you talked about de-risking. It was something else earlier. Now they are talking about de-risking because they realize that you cannot completely cut off any country. So even in that effort, companies that want to shift bases from China or path shifting, they want to come. India is one of the best destinations, and India is trying to position itself as an attractive destination for companies that want to move out from China or other countries to this region. And India is trying to attract those investments also.
Building up a bit on this, many Western companies such as Apple have shifted bases to India. I read a report recently, Apple is planning that within a few years, between 18 to 20% of its global production will happen in India. Many Western countries, US primarily, has also reduced dual-use restrictions on India. So while not everything is perfect, it could be fairly assumed that that the West and India have grown closer and closer, and the West has supported us. There was an article from Ashley Tellis. I don't know if you had read that.
Bad bet.
Yeah, with the smile, I guess you have. So he'd made this point that there would be an expectation. There are things that India is also bringing to the table. Obviously, it is a fair relationship in that sense. But there is an expectation, there could be an expectation from the West that in case things go kinetic in South China Sea, India could be expected to participate. Ashley Tellis made a point. Do you agree, disagree?
No, obviously, Ashley said that the US, whatever US is investing in India is a bad bet. And the reason for saying that for him was that India would never support the US in its strategic initiatives or strategic interests. Now, let me remind to the youngsters here, especially seniors would probably know that post the Second World War, when the US really emerged as the leader of the entire free world, in that capacity, it also developed a syndrome, what others call as the American exceptionalism. The exceptionalism became a syndrome, basically. In the sense that many started believing that if you do not toe my line, you are my enemy. Because I am the good giver of the whole world. I am the one who can deliver good to the world. This exceptionalism was the product of the last century. There was a time when leaders like Nixon, Kissinger, they were all very heavily influenced by this thinking. That's why America acquired this name Globocop, global police. They wanted to police the whole world. So strategic interests of the US were seen as the strategic interests of the entire world. That was the scenario in which the US operated in the last decades of the last century. But I must tell you, in this century, beginning of this century, there was a very definite shift in understanding, at least at the leadership level in US. With President George Bush Jr. onwards to President Obama, they understood that not everything is geostrategic. There is something geoeconomic also, which is also equally important. Geostrategic, there can be lack of convergence, but you have to build geoeconomic convergence with large parts of the world. That initiative was taken by the US. India responded positively. The result is last 20 years, how we grew from strength to strength in our bilateral relationship. May I tell you, in 2000, India and US bilateral partnership was mere $2 billion. And today, it is $193 billion. It grew leaps and bounds. Oh, sorry, $20 billion and $193 billion today. It grew multifold in last 20 years. The reason is this realization. Not everything is geostrategic. For that matter, when George Bush was sending his armies into Iraq, India was asked to join. India said, no, we can't join. We can't be a party to the strategic interests of America. We can be a party to the strategic interests that UN dictates. So this aspect has been understood, appreciated by President Bush, President Obama, President Biden. But some intellectuals will probably take some more time to understand. Maybe Ashley needs more time to understand that strategic divergence can remain. That doesn't make India a bad bet. On the contrary, if you want to avoid war in South China Sea or any other region, the best bet will be India. Because India has that power, that influence, that goodwill in the region. So probably, I know that one very interesting scholar from Stanford wrote a response to Ashley. He said, India is the best bet, not the bad bet. So I would say that probably scholars have to come out of that mindset of exceptionalism mindset. My problem is global problem. But global problem is not my problem. India's problem is not my problem, but America's problem should be India's problem also. Those days are over. Today, we are living in a world of many, many important poles. Some are small, some are big, but they are all important poles. India is a pole. Minilaterals are emerging. They are important poles. There is realization in the political leadership about it. That's why the kind of reception that I talked about for Prime Minister Modi in America that is happening under President Biden's government also. But yeah, probably scholars should understand that other issues also dominate.
All right, now leaving it open for the scholars here to ask questions. Okay, let me start with you, sir. Is there a mic that can go around? Okay, okay. We will move quickly. If I may request, if you could keep your questions short and keep it to the topic itself so that we have a more focused discussion.
Yes, my question, thank you very much for that really interesting discussion. You talk a lot about India growing into its increasing role internationally and the way it's going to represent the global South. But historically, it's given a very limited resource diplomatically compared to, let's say, China. What's your view on that in terms of the resource that's going to be put into that to take up that role?
Okay, it's a very important issue that we are also seized of. India's diplomatic resources per se, if you see, I mean, if you talk in terms of the strength or the core efficiency of the external affairs ministry per se, we need to do much more. We need to increase the strength, the capacity, the investment in that area. That is well appreciated by the government. We are trying to add more numbers to it. But India also enjoys certain other distinct advantages. One of them I already mentioned. We have those civilizational cultural linkages with many of these countries in our neighborhood. Whether you talk about Vietnam or you talk about other countries, we have those civilizational, cultural, historical linkages. That's one strong point. The other strong point is Indian diaspora. Diaspora as a diplomatic instrument, diplomatic tool, has not been fully appreciated in the past. But today, at least Prime Minister Modi's government understands that diaspora can become a major influencer in in enhancing your influence, your place, your strategic interest in the countries where the diaspora exists. Indian diaspora lives today in 190 countries. We are there almost in every country that is there on the map. Where we are there in countries that are not existent on the map also. Like we have a guy in Kailasa, but where is Kailasa? Nobody knows, but they are there.
Yeah.
You talked about climate change. I work for the United Nations Development Program, and we're trying to fund climate adaptation across Global South. And one of the best performing projects that we have is in India. So I want to understand from you, from like the incredible growth story that India has had, how much of it is sustainable and what are we doing to build resilience for vulnerable communities, especially the coastal farmers, right, which get flooded every year?
Oh, firstly, India's commitment to climate issues has been very evident in the last 5-10 years. Even when countries like America walked out, we spearheaded the Paris climate deal and we took it forward. We were the ones who built this International Solar Alliance and made the headquarters, I mean, India as the headquarters for International Solar Alliance. So we have absolute commitment to it. We have already committed to reducing our carbon footprint. India is a big country with developing needs, so it may take a little longer time than many small countries, but India has set a target of 2070 probably to reach the zero emission, attain those zero emission targets. That also includes your question about vulnerable climate vulnerability and communities affected by it. India is seized of that issue. Definitely, government has a number of projects to address climate vulnerability issues. For example, right now, as I'm talking here, India is badly battered by a cyclone. 3 days before the cyclone actually reached anywhere near the coast itself, Prime Minister had held a meeting with all the chief ministers of the states, and all the bureaucratic infrastructure has been already put in active mode to take care of the interests of the vulnerable communities, fishermen and all that. So India is quite aware of the challenge. But I must tell you, this challenge is much bigger for many of our smaller neighbors. Like I mentioned to you about Sri Lanka or about the Maldives, their challenge is much bigger. So India is seized of the challenge for its own people, but also we are seized of the challenge that the entire global South faces, will play an important role.
And that'll be the last question. Go ahead.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
You're audible.
Sir, you've mentioned about India becoming a peace nation for 2047. In practice, how does peace look like with our neighbors, particularly those in Northwest? What strategies are we taking or could take to make it happen?
So point is, India is a peace-loving nation. That's why they are peacefully living. You must remember. So we want all our neighbors to live peacefully, but they should also let us live peacefully, which probably they don't believe. They are net terrorism providers. What can we do? Where we are net peace providers, there are net terrorism providers. It's not my statement. 130 designated terrorists, UN designated terrorists live in our Western neighborhood, which you talked about. 27 UN designated prohibited terrorist organizations are headquartered there. So there are countries in our vicinity, in our neighborhood, which are net violence or terrorism providers to not just India, to the whole world. But India is committed to net peace providing nation, to remain peace providing nation. That is the reason why. Just let me make this final statement. That's the reason why. Today, if there is any country which should jump at the offer of joining the American bandwagon to fight China in South China Sea because of our historical conflict with China. We lost a bad war in 1962. We suffered enormously. As we talk today, we have a standing army of 70,000 Chinese soldiers and 50,000 Indian soldiers facing each other for the last 3 years. Our territory is being encroached upon. I should be the first to jump at that offer and join America and try and have a big fight with China. But we said China-India conflict will be and shall remain a bilateral issue. Because we don't want that to become a global problem and it becomes a global reason for a global war. That is what I'm saying. India's approach will be as peace provider. We have issues with our borders. Which country doesn't have issues with borders? Every country will have. So we want to play a constructive role. We want to resolve issues through mechanisms that will be bilateral. Where there is a need, we will probably approach United Nations, but not definitely on any other country or any other grouping. In that sense, we do not see Quad as some people described it as Indo-Pacific NATO. We don't see it that way. NATO is a military alliance, but Quad cannot be a military alliance. Quad can be anything but military alliance. So that is why I said India's approach will be as net peace provider. Thank you, friends.
Thank you so much.